My friends, many of us live as if we are chained to a shadow that stretches from the past into our present lives. We replay old mistakes, hold onto childhood wounds, and repeat the same patterns because we have not learned how to face what lies within us. The past has power, yes, but it is not meant to enslave us. It is meant to be understood, integrated, and transformed. Carl Jung teaches us that the greatest danger to the human soul is not the events that have happened to us, but our refusal to confront them consciously. For as long as we hide from our past, it controls us. Only by making the unconscious conscious do we free ourselves and open the path to becoming who we truly are. The past is often mistaken for a chain that binds us, but in reality, it is a library of lessons waiting to be read. Too many people believe that their lives are determined entirely by what has already happened to them. They say, "I cannot change because my past made me this way." But this is an illusion. The past does not imprison us unless we choose to see it as a prison. It is not the events themselves that trap us, but our refusal to face them consciously and reinterpret their meaning. What Carl Jung understood is that the past is not destiny. It is material for growth, and if we learn how to use it, it becomes our teacher instead of our captor. Every experience we have ever lived carries both pain and potential. A broken relationship, a lost opportunity, a childhood wound. These can become scars that dictate our future choices, or they can become sources of wisdom that guide us toward greater strength. The difference lies in our willingness to confront them honestly. If we avoid our past, bury it, or deny it, it gains control over us. It seeps into our behavior, our relationships, and our thoughts in unconscious ways. But if we face it with courage, we can extract its lessons and transform it into something meaningful. Consider the person who has failed deeply in life, perhaps in their career or in love. They may carry this failure like a curse, believing that they are doomed to repeat it forever. Their identity becomes fused with the past. "I am a failure." But Jung would say that this is not the truth. It is merely a story created by the ego. The failure itself is not the end, but a sign pointing inward. It asks, what have you not yet understood about yourself? What illusions need to be shattered? What new path is waiting to be walked? In this sense, the past event is not a prison wall, but a doorway, though it often appears at first as a painful one. The same is true of wounds inflicted upon us by others. Many people carry childhood injuries, unresolved traumas, or the weight of neglect. These wounds often manifest later as fear, anger, or self-doubt. Left unexamined, they seem to dictate the entire trajectory of one's future. Yet Jung's psychology tells us that within every wound lies the potential for growth. Pain, when integrated, becomes wisdom. The child who once felt powerless may become the adult who discovers deep inner strength. The one who once felt abandoned may become the person who learns to stand firm in their individuality. The past provides the raw material, but we decide whether it becomes a cage or a foundation. To see the past as a teacher is to shift from passivity to responsibility. It is to recognize that life is not asking us to erase what has been, but to learn from it, to integrate it, and to move forward with deeper awareness. No one is condemned to remain forever the same. The past does not dictate the future unless we allow it to. The human being is always in a state of becoming, and the past, when seen rightly, is the soil from which the future can grow. What we do not face, we are doomed to repeat. This is the profound truth behind Jung's warning that what we do not make conscious appears in our lives as fate. The wounds of the past do not disappear simply because we ignore them. They remain buried in the unconscious, influencing our choices, shaping our relationships, and pulling us toward the same patterns again and again. Unhealed pain becomes a cycle, and until we bring it into awareness, we find ourselves reliving the same story, as if trapped in a loop written long before we had the chance to choose. Imagine someone who, as a child, grew up with neglect or rejection. That experience imprints itself deep within their psyche. As an adult, they may unconsciously seek out relationships that mirror this dynamic, partners who ignore them, friends who use them, or workplaces that undervalue them. They do not consciously desire this, yet the unresolved wound within them pulls them toward it. The psyche, in a strange way, seeks to recreate what it has not yet healed, as if replaying the wound might finally bring resolution. But unless the person confronts the original source of the pain, the pattern will repeat endlessly, each time leaving them more convinced that life has cursed them. This repetition is not punishment. It is the psyche's attempt at wholeness. Jung saw the unconscious not as an enemy, but as a guide, continually trying to draw our attention to what remains unresolved. When we find ourselves trapped in the same mistakes, the same relationships, the same disappointments, it is a signal. Something deep within us is asking to be acknowledged. The problem is not that the past happened, but that we have not yet integrated its lessons. What is buried alive does not die. It lives on in our behaviors and choices until we finally bring it to light. The danger of ignoring unhealed wounds is that we begin to believe they are our destiny. Someone who has been betrayed may live in constant suspicion, convinced that every relationship will end the same way. Someone who once failed may carry that failure like an identity, convinced they are doomed to repeat it. But the truth is different. These cycles are not fate, they are mirrors. They are opportunities to recognize what still controls us from the shadows. The moment we confront them, the cycle loses its power. Healing requires the courage to turn inward. It requires us to revisit the wounds we would rather avoid, not to wallow in them but to understand them. This is the essence of Jung's approach, bringing the unconscious into consciousness. When we do this, the pattern breaks. The neglected child learns self-worth. The betrayed heart learns to trust with discernment. The failed dreamer learns resilience and direction. The cycle no longer needs to repeat because the lesson has been integrated. So long as we avoid the wounds of our past, we mistake repetition for fate. But the moment we face them, we realize that the future does not have to look like yesterday. Healing is not erasing the wound, but transforming it into wisdom. And once that wisdom is ours, we step out of the loop and into freedom. Carl Jung taught us that within each of us lies a shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, suppress, or refuse to acknowledge. These aspects may include anger, jealousy, greed, vulnerability, or even hidden talents and desires that we are too afraid to claim. The danger of ignoring this shadow is that it does not disappear simply because we pretend it doesn't exist. Instead, it grows in power, exerting influence over our lives from the unconscious, showing up in ways that sabotage our relationships, our ambitions, and even our sense of self. To stop the past from dictating our future, we must have the courage to turn toward the shadow and integrate it into the whole of who we are. When we repress aspects of ourselves, they emerge in distorted and destructive forms. For example, someone who suppresses their anger in the name of being good or peaceful may find that anger seethes beneath the surface, erupting at unexpected times, or attracting them to environments where rage dominates. Someone who denies their desire for recognition may unconsciously undermine others, or may sabotage themselves so that they never have to face the risk of success. The shadow always finds a way out. The question is whether it will manifest unconsciously as a destructive force, or consciously as a source of power and growth. Integrating the shadow does not mean indulging every dark impulse. Rather, it means becoming honest about what is inside us. Jung insisted that wholeness, not perfection, is the true goal of psychological growth. We are not meant to be saints stripped of all flaws. We are meant to be full human beings, capable of light and dark, capable of creation and destruction, capable of tenderness and ferocity. When we embrace the shadow consciously, we begin to use its energy in constructive ways. Anger can become the courage to set boundaries. Ambition can become the drive to create something meaningful. Fear can sharpen awareness. Even jealousy can teach us what we truly desire. By refusing to look at our shadow, we project it onto others. We demonize them for qualities we cannot face in ourselves. The intolerant person often carries a deep inner intolerance they will not acknowledge. The moralist who condemns others often hides their own secret transgressions. Projection is the unconscious way of dealing with what we do not want to admit about ourselves. Only by integrating the shadow can we stop projecting it onto the world and begin to take responsibility for our own inner life. The past plays a large role in shaping the shadow. Childhood wounds, cultural conditioning, family expectations, all of these contribute to the parts of ourselves we exile. But if we allow these unacknowledged parts to remain hidden, they become the unseen forces shaping our future. The moment we face them, however, they lose their destructive hold. We reclaim the energy we once spent in repression and projection, and we begin to live more authentically. To integrate the shadow is to claim freedom. It is to stop being dragged forward by the unseen weight of what we refuse to acknowledge. When we make peace with our shadow, the past no longer repeats itself unconsciously. We stand in the present as whole beings, able to choose the future with clarity and strength. Resentment is one of the heaviest chains that binds us to the past. Carl Jung understood that unprocessed emotions do not vanish. They linger within the unconscious and shape our behaviors, our choices, and even our identities. When we carry resentment, whether toward a parent, a friend, a partner, or even ourselves, we carry the wound of the past into the present moment. Instead of moving forward, we replay old hurts again and again, allowing them to dictate how we see ourselves and how we relate to others. The path to freedom begins with forgiveness, not as an act of excusing others, but as a conscious choice to release ourselves from the grip of the past. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. Many resist it because they believe it means condoning what was done, erasing responsibility, or pretending the harm did not matter. But forgiveness is not about forgetting. It is about refusing to let the wound define us. To forgive is to reclaim the energy that resentment drains from us. Resentment consumes mental space, emotional energy, and spiritual vitality. It keeps us tethered to the person or situation that hurt us, long after the moment has passed. In this way, resentment becomes a form of self-imprisonment. Forgiveness, then, is not primarily for the other person, it is for ourselves. Jung saw the psyche as always seeking balance, wholeness, and integration. Resentment fractures the psyche. It keeps part of us frozen in the moment of pain. We cannot grow fully when parts of us remain stuck in old battles. By forgiving, we allow those frozen parts to thaw. We permit the wound to transform into wisdom rather than scar tissue that dictates our lives. Forgiveness is not instant. It is often a gradual process, a peeling away of layers of bitterness. But even the smallest step toward it begins to free us. Holding on to resentment also keeps us trapped in the roles of victim and oppressor. We continue to see ourselves as the injured one, which robs us of agency. This victim identity becomes part of the self, distorting how we approach relationships and opportunities. But when we forgive, we take back our power. We stop defining ourselves solely by what was done to us. Instead, we open the door to defining ourselves by who we are becoming. Forgiveness is not passive. It is one of the most courageous acts a person can undertake, because it means choosing freedom over the familiar comfort of bitterness. It is important to remember that forgiveness does not always mean reconciliation. It does not mean keeping harmful people in our lives or ignoring the need for boundaries. Forgiveness is an inner act, a releasing of the emotional grip the past holds on us. Sometimes, it means walking away entirely, but doing so without hatred poisoning the heart. Jung believed that the goal of individuation was wholeness, and wholeness cannot exist if part of us remains chained to old grievances. To let go of resentment is to give ourselves the gift of presence. It is to say, the past has shaped me, but it does not define me. Forgiveness allows us to carry the lessons forward without carrying the pain. Only then do we truly stop the past from dictating our future. Carl Jung believed that the human soul is not meant to be free of wounds, but rather to transform them into sources of meaning and strength. To stop letting the past dictate our future, we must move beyond resentment and repression into the deeper work of transmutation, turning our suffering into wisdom. Wounds, when unhealed, bind us to cycles of repetition, fear, and self-doubt. But when we consciously engage with them, they become teachers, offering insights into who we are, what we value, and what we must grow into. The key lies not in erasing the pain, but in transforming it. Think of the ancient symbol of alchemy, which Jung often used to describe the psyche's journey. In alchemy, base metals are transformed into gold. In the same way, our most painful experiences can be transmuted into the gold of understanding, compassion, and resilience. But this does not happen passively. It requires us to face the wound directly, to engage with the emotions it stirs, and to ask what lesson lies hidden within the suffering. The past, once integrated, no longer chains us. It propels us forward. Take the example of someone who experienced abandonment as a child. At first, that wound may create patterns of fear, distrust, or codependency. But if this person chooses to confront the pain, they may discover within it the seed of deep empathy for others who feel alone. That very wound can become the foundation for building strong, meaningful relationships, rooted not in fear of abandonment, but in conscious choice and genuine care. The wound becomes wisdom when it teaches us not just about our own lives, but about the human condition itself. Jung stressed that wholeness is achieved not by denying pain, but by embracing it as part of the journey. When we refuse to learn from our wounds, we remain trapped in victimhood, endlessly repeating the same story. But when we accept the wound as a teacher, we expand. Painful experiences often reveal hidden strengths, courage we did not know we had, creativity born from struggle, or clarity about what truly matters. Our scars then stop being marks of weakness, and instead become emblems of survival and growth. The transformation of wounds into wisdom also creates a ripple effect. When we share our hard-earned lessons, we contribute to the collective growth of humanity. A person who has transformed their pain into compassion can offer healing to others who are still caught in their wounds. In this way, personal suffering becomes universal wisdom. Jung called this the individuation process, the journey toward becoming a whole and authentic self. Each wound, when integrated, adds another piece to the mosaic of our wholeness. The truth is that pain will always visit us in life, but it does not have to dominate us. Every wound carries within it both danger and possibility. The danger of being trapped in bitterness, and the possibility of awakening to deeper meaning. To choose transformation is to say, my pain is real, but it will not define me. Instead, I will carry it as wisdom, using it to guide my choices, deepen my relationships, and shape a future that reflects not my suffering, but my strength. Carl Jung often reminded us that without self-awareness, we do not live our lives, we are lived by them. When the past remains unconscious, it acts as a hidden script, dictating how we think, feel, and act. We may believe we are choosing freely, but in reality, old wounds, inherited beliefs, and unresolved conflicts steer us silently from beneath the surface. To break free from this cycle, self-awareness becomes essential. It is the act of shining a light on the unconscious, of pausing long enough to question, why do I feel this way? Why do I always choose this kind of relationship? Why do I sabotage myself right before success? These questions open the door to freedom because they allow us to recognize when it is the past, not the present, that is guiding us. Self-awareness is not simply knowing facts about ourselves, such as our preferences or habits. It is a deeper kind of seeing, one that examines the patterns behind our actions. It asks us to look beyond surface behavior and into the root causes, the beliefs we inherited from family, the wounds we carried from childhood, and the fears we absorbed from culture. Jung believed that until these forces are brought into consciousness, they control us. But the moment they are seen, we have a choice. Awareness transforms compulsion into possibility. For example, imagine someone who repeatedly ends up in toxic friendships. Without awareness, they might conclude that life is cruel or that they are simply unlucky. But with self-awareness, they begin to ask, why am I drawn to these people? What part of me feels comfortable in these dynamics? Perhaps they realize that the friendships mirror an unresolved relationship with a neglectful parent. Or perhaps they notice that their fear of abandonment leads them to accept treatment they do not deserve. With that awareness, the cycle loses its unconscious grip. They may still feel the pull at first, but now they can pause, reflect, and choose differently. Self-awareness also creates space between stimulus and response. Instead of reacting blindly to emotions or triggers, we can step back and decide how to act. This is where true freedom lies. If someone criticizes us and we feel rage, self-awareness allows us to ask, is this about the present, or am I reliving an old wound? Often, we discover that the intensity of our reactions belongs more to the past than to the current moment. By recognizing this, we stop the past from hijacking the present. However, self-awareness requires courage. To truly see ourselves is not always comfortable. We uncover contradictions, fears, and parts of ourselves we may prefer to ignore. Yet Jung insisted that wholeness is impossible without this confrontation. We cannot transform what we refuse to face. Self-awareness demands honesty, but it also offers liberation. With it, we gain the power to step outside old patterns and live with intention. Ultimately, self-awareness is the foundation of conscious choice. Without it, we live by repetition. With it, we create. Each moment becomes an opportunity not to reenact the past, but to shape the future. In awareness, we reclaim our freedom, and in choice, we build a life that reflects who we truly are, not the wounds that once bound us. To stop letting the past dictate your future, one of the most important steps is learning to embrace the future with courage and openness. Carl Jung believed that the psyche is always in motion, always calling us toward growth and transformation. Yet many people resist this call because stepping into the unknown feels terrifying. The past, even if painful, feels familiar. The future, by contrast, demands that we release control, accept uncertainty, and trust in our ability to adapt. It requires courage, the willingness to move forward despite fear, and openness, the ability to meet what comes without clinging to old defenses. Fear of the future is often rooted in the past. If we have been hurt, abandoned, or betrayed, we may unconsciously expect life to repeat the same patterns. We anticipate disappointment before it even arrives. This mindset keeps us stuck, replaying the past in our imagination instead of creating something new. Courage, then, is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. To embrace the future courageously is to recognize, yes, I may fail, yes, I may be hurt, but I will not allow fear to make me a prisoner of yesterday. Openness is equally essential. The more rigidly we cling to expectations or old ways of being, the more we resist the natural flow of life. Jung saw individuation, the process of becoming our truest self, as a journey that requires surrender to life's unfolding. If we approach the future with openness, we allow room for surprise, growth, and transformation. Opportunities often come in forms we do not expect. People who change our lives arrive when we are not ready. Challenges we fear often reveal strengths we didn't know we had. By keeping our hearts and minds open, we allow life to shape us rather than trying to force it into the mold of the past. Courage and openness are not passive qualities, they are practices. To live with courage, we must continually challenge the voice of fear within us, reminding ourselves that growth lies beyond comfort. To live with openness, we must resist the temptation to close off after disappointment, to harden our hearts against life. Instead, we keep showing up, willing to engage with what comes. In this way, the future becomes a canvas, not a repetition of old wounds. When we meet the future courageously, we also learn to trust ourselves. We may not control what happens, but we know we can handle it. This self-trust is a powerful antidote to the paralysis of fear. And when we remain open, we discover that life often brings us exactly the experiences we need for growth, even if they do not match our desires in the moment. Courage allows us to walk into the unknown. Openness allows us to receive its gifts. In the end, the future will always arrive, whether we fear it or not. The choice is whether we step into it as prisoners of the past or as creators of something new. By embracing the future with courage and openness, we honor Jung's vision of individuation, becoming whole not by clinging to yesterday, but by daring to live fully today, trusting that tomorrow holds possibilities far greater than the shadows of our past.